Let's talk self mastery. Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Healing into Femininity. My name is Joanna, and today I want to dive into Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I'm going to continue to speak about that to really make us all understand how we, as women, and also as feminine women, beautiful women, compassionate women, nurturing women, mothering women can step into leadership because I truly believe that is the time of more feminine leadership when women don't compromise who they are, meaning their biology, their natural biological instincts and gifts, and also stepping into a mental capacity of really leading, solving problems, taking responsibility, taking on a sector of life and solving problems, nurturing into health, success, and solutions. Okay, so a little bit about me if you're new here. I am an international business graduate. I am a holistic nutritionist and I am a certified life mastery consultant that entails psychology, education, spirituality, and personal development. All of that is in this training that I've mastered or that I've gone through. Okay. And one of my favorite topics is using the hierarchy of needs to explain the topic of self mastery and therefore stepping into a natural leadership. Okay, so I have my little note block here and I am going to talk to you about it and how we as women again can actually create the capacity to naturally step into leadership. Okay, so first of all, we have to understand who we are as humans, right? The first level is to understand that and what we truly need and what we want, and also, therefore, designing what it is that we can create from where we are with what we have right now. Because one of the big misconceptions is to think that you first have to do this and that in order to step into leadership. You first have to become amazing, become great, get this next certification or whatever, whatever. Today is also a little bit about assessing like where you are. So I want you to take a take a cup of tea and really sit down, maybe even take notes, but just tune in, listening, and let that wash over you. Okay, so the first level here is the physiological, right? I will bring back this sheet of paper again and again, even though it's maybe not so good to see, but I think it's good enough. Um, so the first level is physiological, very basic, right? What we all need as humans is food, clothes, shelter, and sex. Okay, once we are actually ready to have sex, which is around 13, 14. Okay, so physiological needs. So we need to pay our rent, we need to eat, we need to clothe ourselves, we need to have those basic needs set. Right? I live in Germany, so I will speak about the Western world, okay? So, but that goes for every human animal. That is the things that we all need, and we are constantly looking for those things if we don't know where our next meal is coming from. Yeah. So we want to know this is what we need. If we have that, we're set. And this is also very important because many people think they have to continue running and running for the next better, right? The next better home, apartment, luxury, the next better thing and better thing. That's not what I'm promoting, right? Like we will get to that. But I think you just need first, you just need a nice place to stay, have food in your belly, have your rent paid, right? And have some clothes and some like that's it, basically. Water, food, clothes, shelter. Okay? That's all you need to survive for now. Okay? Then it's about safety. That's the next level. Feeling safe, of course, right? Feeling safe so you can rest, you can sleep, you can rest, and you're not constantly feeling threatened, right? Those needs come from our very primal instincts, meaning from when we were still living in the forest. But this is still in us because the physiology hasn't changed, right? So we want to feel safe, okay? Safe, which means our physical body is not threatened. I want to also talk a little bit about physiology and then also psychology, because many people are still in survival mode because psychologically they don't feel safe. Yeah, but that's a different thing between physical and psychological. It's a little bit hard. English is not my native language, and somehow today it's a little tricky, but you get me. Okay, so physiological needs: food, clothes, shelter, sex, and then safety, right? Physical safety, very important. Also psychological, but it goes hand in hand. Then the next level is belonging, right? Belonging to a group. Again, this ties back to survival, right? Food, clothes, shelter, it's all about survival, right? So your body can survive, you feel safe, survival, belonging. The more people are around where you are together, where you maybe collect food together, where you maybe hunt together for food, or even build houses together, right? Not all of the physical load is on you. So, being part of a group, belonging, is part of a survival strategy, aka tribalism. So, I personally, just preparing this sheet before coming online, I was thinking about also, because another background story, obviously I'm a brown woman. My dad was from Ghana, my mom was German, and my bachelor's thesis I wrote about culture dynamics. There's one guy, his name is Gerd Hofstede. It's in the is the business, international business context. I studied international business, and Gerd Hofstede had a study, a long, like many years study, where he studied the dimensions of a culture and how you can measure the differences of a culture, where it's about like collectivistic cultures or individualistic cultures. Collectivistic cultures obviously are also more feminine and also more tribal. And most of these cultures are still more of the so called poor countries, like African countries or Arabic countries or Indian, right? Like more collectivistic cultures. The West is generally more individualistic, and also because of the resources, people can have more privacy, are more individualistic. Okay, so this is based on Gerd Hofstede's cultural dimensions and the different dimensions by which you can measure the differences of a culture. I studied that. This is what I wrote my thesis on. So I have this background knowledge of culture. I'm saying all of that to say that I see that here in the hierarchy of needs as well. The more poverty, or the more people are still more in survival mode. They need each other more, right? They need each other for survival. It's a need, it's not a want, it's still out of necessity. So people need each other by this third dimension of the hierarchy of needs, okay? Physiological, safety, and then belonging. Belonging, again, as I said, is a more of a feminine thing, right? Ghanaian culture, for example, is a more feminine culture. It's more tribal, it's more collective. That is what the belonging is about. People need to feel safe through belonging to a group. Good. Then the next level is esteem or self esteem. And I attribute that to a more masculine society, a more individualistic society where it's more about the individual, where it's more about the ego, where it's more about also individualism is about clothes, right? You want to separate yourself from the group because that is a human need in the hierarchy of needs, right? Once you have enough resources where you can actually separate yourself from the group because you no longer need them to survive, right? Not in the urgency, you create a level of esteem where you're like, okay, I am going on this career path. I am going to work for this company, right? Now I make my money. Now I have more resources. Now I am going to move to a certain neighborhood that is of my liking, right? I am freer, right? I have more choice, I have more options, and therefore I am going to separate myself distinctively by where I shop, right? All of the different varieties. That's where all of the consumerist products come from. I worked in different kinds of departments throughout my corporate career, and especially in sales. I know that that's sales psychology. People do not necessarily buy out of necessity, people also buy through making a statement. This whole dimension of esteem comes with making a statement and saying, oh, I have these symbols of individualism, right? I eat here, I buy at Trader's Joe, also because I understand that it's healthy, but also because I can, right? I am driving a BMW or a Porsche or a whatever Mercedes Benz because I can. It's a symbol of freedom, it's a symbol of status. The same thing about clothing, right? Style, individual style, personal style, signature style, right? All of these things come from the urge inside of us to set ourselves apart from the group, right? We don't want to be enmeshed in the group, but that comes with a level of power. The whole hierarchy of needs is a level of personal power, right? So esteem is not like belonging is more tribal, feminine, collective. It's more of a necessity to belong to a group. But most people stay in the group think, okay, but I'm going to talk more about the things. Just for now, let's just explain what it is. So, esteem is individualistic, is more masculine, is more ego, is a little bit also like I'm better than the rest. I want to set myself apart. I am an individual and I will act that way, signal it, communicate it. I am different from you. I dress different. I am distinct, right? I have my personal style. You get it. That is in the esteem category. But that's the last level of, I would say, the ego, the survival mode. That is not the end of the hierarchy. But in many Western countries, this is where people are generally in the esteem category, right? Everyone is different. Everyone is so different. People are trying to out differentiate each other like I'm so different. And this is a very big trap. I always like to say that you are not important or you are not that special. And that's true because still we are like most of the things that we have in common are the same, which are the survival human needs. But once you now get over the esteem level, it's an important level. You get to the next level, which is actualization, self actualization. And for me, self actualization, what I see here is it is also, it's not the end, it is about consolidation. That's the word that I came up with today. Consolidation meaning you understand now, okay, you have kind of mastered the physical realm of individualizing yourself, and that is it. Actualization is bringing everything together. It's the first time where you really go within. This is, I believe, this is the first time where we can actually have a little bit of a spiritual awakening, where we have the physical needs met, also the need of the ego to be distinct, but then individualization is about integration, is the feminine aspect, like the feeling and the more of the compassion of the spiritual aspect, and the masculine, which is I am distinct, I am an individual, I do certain things. It's also about the doing, right? I do certain things, but I also feel. So self-actualization is through inner work, becoming conscious of the self, becoming conscious of the self and all of the dimensions before, becoming conscious of the physiology and what we need here, then the safety, the belonging, right? The esteem. And now it's really about consciousness. It's about understanding self, is really about understanding and designing, right? Who you are, but also, my opinion, from a embodied perspective of I am I'm not that special and I'm special, right? Like I am not my body. That is a spiritual concept, right? I'm not my body. I am not what I've accumulated. That's not what I am. I did that, but that's not who I am. So let me find out who I truly am. And this is more of a self discovery, spiritual path, right? That is more of the internal. And then self actualization is consolidating the feminine aspect and the masculine aspect. It's understanding your lower nature, understanding your ego, and understanding also the importance of it, but also understanding that you're not it. You're not trapped by it. Okay. But you're both, right? You're the spiritual being in the human experience. That is what self actualization is, and the individualization. It's really the coming together of understanding both. And then the next level, I think it's more of a fluid, is a fluid, yeah, it's not a strict line, right? It's a fluid thing, there's a fluid understanding. The next level, the highest level of the pyramid is self-actualization is here. And then for me personally, this is here, is the top of the pyramid is transcendence, right? It's transcendence and also becoming the observer self, right? Becoming the observer self, meaning understanding and cultivating the one that is able to actually observe yourself. This is what you do in meditation, where you cultivate the observer self. You cultivate the ability to observe your body and its needs and urges and impulses. You observe it instead of acting upon it unconsciously. And at the same time, and that's a very important part, is you learn to observe your thoughts. You observe your thoughts. And this is where I say, like, a level of mental hygiene begins, where you realize, okay, this thought is not serving me. This impulse is not serving me, right? This what I thought, this program is not serving me. This only animalistic program is not serving me, right? Like I don't have enough, I am not enough, I'm afraid, I don't feel like I belong, things like that. The insecurities of the ego can be observed in the level of transcendence, right? Where you become more and more of the observer self, and consciously, you can also call that becoming your higher self, right? And consciously observing the lower nature of yourself. That's why I always like to say understanding self is understanding everybody, right? That's why I'm here to help women to lead. Yes. So good. Again, that is so important. Physiological physiological needs need to be met: food, clothes, shelter, safety, belonging, right? Where do you belong? Who are your people? And I'm going to come to that next. I believe that it's very important to, you don't have to belong to a big group, okay? But let me finish that first. Then it's about self-esteem. We are becoming more masculine, more individualized, more ego. You have to be a fully developed ego before you can transcend. Yeah. Then is self-actualization, which I believe is consolidation, is individualization, is becoming feminine and masculine, is both understanding both parts of you and going within, right? Going within is more the feminine aspect. That's why my brand is called Healing into Femininity, right? From the self esteem, the ego, to more of a spiritual self. And then the transcendence, which is really being, cultivating, and becoming more of the observer self, the mind, the higher self that navigates yourself through this world. Okay, now I want to give a little bit context to all of those levels, okay? The physiological, today I can't, the physiological needs. In the beginning, when you just want to survive, you will eat everything, right? That's why many times when you are not conscious and you just eat whatever maybe was available in the household or in the house in general, again, it's always a difference between being very poor or having more options, right? But in the beginning, you will just eat anything, right? And then once you get to the level of self-esteem and then to become and transcend more into self-actualization and transcendence, you are now conscious. That means you can educate yourself of understanding your animal nature. That's why it's so important to know thyself. And knowing thyself is not only knowing your higher self, which we will come to later, but it's also about knowing your lower nature. Very important. I believe that that's even more important, right? Having been on this journey for several years now, myself, 10 years plus, I have realized that it's even more important to understand your physical self than to understand your observer self. Maybe both is important, but today we're focusing on understanding your lower nature. So again, you have been trained or programmed subconsciously without your consent, just by living life and being in the environment that you grew up in. You have learned to eat certain foods, right? You're now addicted, accustomed, used to eating certain kinds of food without thinking about it, right? Most people only wake up to a level of self-actualization or transcendence when shit hit the fan, right? People wake up when they realize that what they have been doing up until now has led to a catastrophe, right? A disease, an illness, some kind of incident. And that is when we can reassess, what have I been eating? Sugar, white bread, right? Degenerate food, right? That is where we can now assess and say, okay, I'm studying my body. What my body actually needs is like protein and fiber. My body needs protein, like these are the building blocks of my muscles and most of the things. I need micronutrients like iron and other micronutrients, right? Zinc and so on and so forth. And I need fiber so my body can digest all of the things, right? We need some of that. So this is where like knowledge of physiology comes in, right? And when we if we know better, we hopefully do better. So we start eating different. If we make the jump of actually letting go of an addiction, because most people are trapped in the lower nature because of their addictions to what they have consumed and implemented while they were unconscious. Now, hear me out. That is it. Most people are stuck in their lower nature, meaning in their body, and addicted to things that they have taken on when they were unconscious, right? You started eating a certain way through family and through whatever where you are, and then you keep it because you're addicted now. Very important. So if we know better, we do better, right? Good. Okay. I could talk about that for days. The next level is the safety level, right? Safety. Safety is, as I said before, is mainly physical. But depending on, again, how we grew up, in the families that we grew up, or in the surroundings, the environments that we grew up, we have made some experiences where we didn't feel physically safe. And for example, somebody hit you, or a parent hit you, or abused you, things like that, or other people in your direct surroundings, you don't feel physically safe, even if you are now in a room by yourself, because that imprint on your nervous system is now running in your system, even though it's no longer present. But that is what a trauma is. A trauma is an imprint onto your system, onto your energy body, onto your nervous system, that keeps on running even if the danger or if the traumatic experience is no longer imminent. It's not present, it's not there, it's not here right now, but people still have it running in their system. That's why it's important to become conscious of it. That's what I do in my flagship program, the Dream Builder System, where we really get like rid or become conscious of old traumas. So you can now reintegrate it from a conscious standpoint. Okay, so safety, physical but also psychological, because most of the time the psychological imprint is deeper than the psychological imprints reflects back on the physiological the physiological physiological sorry, but that's it. um so the what we think, we feel, right? We can prove that by, if you really vividly think about yourself, like taking a bite into a lemon, you will salivate, right? There's more salivation coming in your mouth. So what we think, our body reproduces. So we have to create a new level of safety. Again, as I said, we are trapped by the things that we have taken on, the generational curses. That's exactly what it is, when we were in our unconscious state. So we were unconscious and maybe not powerful as children. We were in a more of a victim state because we couldn't physically do anything against whoever harmed us. That's a fact when we were children. But now we are coming from an adult standpoint where we can rewire those things. The safety, okay? Learning to reprogram a level of safety while we are in a real safe environment and there is no imminent danger. Okay. The next is the belonging, right? Everything from physiological safety, belonging, those things are real survival needs, and those things are things that we walk through as children. And in the beginning of our lives, we needed other people for that. We did, right? So belonging was very important for our survival. Belonging to our mother, right? She fed us. She was the one protecting us in the best case, right? Protecting us, providing for us, right? Caring for us, nurturing us. And then the overall family taking care, hopefully, of one another, the tribe, right? We need the tribe so everybody can have their physiological and safety needs met. Now, the thing again, people, once you become conscious, because you get burned, for example, again, people wake up when they are in pain, when, as I made the example with the sickness, with the disease, right? That's the only time, most of the time, not always, where people wake up and then change something, right? You get a disease and then you're like, shit, it can't continue like that. And then you get on a journey of discovering better things for your body. The same thing is about belonging, right? We do not want to belong to certain kind of people anymore when we again and again see them hurting us, right? When you are again and again, generational trauma or a pattern, you do it, you get involved with certain kind of people, and then they hurt you. And then hopefully one day you wake up and then you go back to this belonging pattern and you reprogram it, because yes, we do need people, but now you're an adult. You don't need people like that anymore. You do not need people to survive. You can now feed yourself, you can take care of yourself, you have the capabilities, right? And you can be your own company for a while, right? So you do not necessarily need people to survive. So the thing that sabotages or blocks us, just like with the food, is that you are addicted to a certain like outcome response, right? For example, with the food, you eat white bread, it's sugar, it's carbs, it creates a level of, oh, I like that, it's familiar, it's tasty to me because you've been conditioned to like it. The same thing is with white bread is toxic, right? The same thing is with toxic people. You are so used to it, you're so programmed by your life experience that this is the kind of food that you need. People are toxic, people are not good for you, but you eat it because you think it tastes good, just like white bread. You understand? So the same thing with belonging. In order to get to the next level and actually really self actualize and self transcend, right? It's about getting rid of it, detoxing. Detoxing from the bad food, detoxing from the wrong environments, detoxing from the wrong people, right? Getting rid of the urge to try to be popular or nice or keep the keep the peace, keep the peace, keep the relationship. No, we don't want that, right? We are detoxifying ourselves from the imprints of the past, right? From the food, from the drinks, from whatever, from the sex, right? We are stop hoarding, also safety, psychological safety. This is where the hoarding comes from, where people hoard and they think they're not safe. They need more to feel safe. That's it. Detox from that, right? Belonging, again, try to be popular, try to be nice, the nice girl, try to fit in. These are all the survival mechanisms, especially the what we call the sympathetic nervous system responses are fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, right? Especially in the realm of belonging, is the fawning. Fawning is like the trying to appeal, trying to please. That is a feminine, mostly feminine, people pleasing response of trying to belong, right? Knowing we do need to belong to, until a certain age because it is necessary for our survival, but then we want to repattern it and go beyond. Okay. Okay. And then the next level again is esteem. As I said, more masculine. It's more through doing. It's not being passive. It's through doing. It's the ego. It has a sense of I am different than you. I am better than you. I'm an individual and I will show it. through the brands that I wear, the clothes that I wear, right? The makeup, the places that I go, the car that I drive, the neighborhood that I live in. I will try to separate myself from the masses and signal that I am better. That is like the self esteem. Most of the time, that's how we acquire self esteem, through a degree, through knowledge, through a level of power. Good. We also want to repattern that, right? That is not necessarily only a good thing. It is something, but it's not necessarily, it's not all. So, one thing that comes from being like stuck and addicted to that unconscious self-esteem building is like an addiction to consumerism. That's exactly this level that we're speaking about. Addiction to consumerism. As I said, this self-esteem thing is a disease of the West. This is where most of the Western world is stuck. We are not necessarily stuck in true survival mode, right? Not in true survival mode. Like, we have enough food most of the time, right? We are physically safe if you're not in a abusive environment, right? And you, like, the belonging thing, okay, is a different thing. Like, that's many times that's a little bit contradictory, right? The belonging and the esteem, that's a problem in the Western world. More isolation, more people are alone. That's happening. But this esteem thing, again, in general, is not necessarily something positive. It has to become conscious as well, because the addiction here, just like the white bread or the toxic relationships, is trying to prove that you are so individual. That's why people, like, they force their individualism, like in the way they stand out, the way they dress. Yes, you're so different, you're so distinct, you're so unique, right? Everybody's speaking about unique, unique, unique. That is a trap. Okay. So through brands and makeup and hair and style, and, as I said, symbols, right? I'm so different, going with trends, right? Going with trends and constantly trying to prove that you're an individual. That is this whole esteem thing. It's an ego thing, right? Trying to get validated because you are so special. This is an addiction, right? Like, always needing the validation of your individual, right? Your beauty and yourself. Again, I always like to say that, especially for women, nobody actually really cares about you. I always like to say that, just to be a little provocative. Nobody actually really cares about you. Will make you sober minded, right? Like, you're not that special. Thinking you're the exception will actually get you run over quicker than anything. Thinking that you are so different from other women, no, you're not, right? Yes, of course, you're unique, but everyone is unique, okay? So, very important, get rid of the addiction to have to stand out, to have to be distinct and unique and always try to find a way to stand out. That is exhausting, okay? But that's, again, that's also an addiction, just like the white bread, just like the hoarding, just like the trying to fit in, right? It's a little contradicting, trying to fit in and then trying to stand out is very is a little opposite, is a little contradicting, but sometimes we have both, right? Maybe we try to stand out through the way we look, but we still try to appeal through agreeing in our opinions, right? Okay, good. So, and now we get to the level of self-actualization. And then self-actualization can also be a trap. I call this the spiritual trap, the spiritual ego, right? There's a spiritual ego where people think, because now they are on the level of self-actualization and they learn spiritual principles, they are now in their spiritual esteem, right? In their spiritual ego. But ultimately, self-actualization is individualization, and it's about integrating the feminine, the spiritual, and the human. Is the spiritual being in a human experience. And this is where people can get addicted to the whole concept of manifestation, right? Has been a huge trend the past 10 years. I've been definitely part of the wave as well. As I said, and it's still part of it, but I'm just pointing out the traps. Going within, right? Only meditating or setting intention, or people being in this whole like spiritual bubble of like setting intention and burning petitions and things like that. Perfect. That's good. But don't think that you're better than anybody else necessarily because you do this, or also don't get lost in only that part, because you're still human, spiritual being in a human experience, right? And you still want to also do something, right? Like self-actualization is the first time where you come more into a spiritual understanding. It's like going within, meditating, right? um yeah, really, yeah, coming from within, expanding from within, right? Coming more into a flow state, right? And also getting into a level of service, which is also important, right? This is also part of this self actualization. Now you feel like, oh, I have enough to give, and I can be of service to other people. But again, we want to keep the balance, okay? So the toxic part of the self actualization can be to dive too deep into only meditation, manifestation, hoping and wishing, right, that things happen for us. Okay, good. And as I said, I believe that the ultimate goal is really transcendence, and that is residing in more of our observer self. And this observer self, again, is the part of us that is able to observe our physiological needs and impulses, hunger, tiredness, right? Not feeling safe, um, wanting to belong, right? Wanting to stand out, and wanting to go within. We can now see all of that. We can now observe all of it. And we can also observe, maybe, where am I still addicted to old or toxic ways? Again, the white bread, the hoarding, right? The trying to people please. Now we can observe ourselves. We can observe where we are human, right? Where we are still human, and our natural wiring, and also our programming. The programming is, yeah, what I said, like what we accumulated through adapting with our personal environment when were younger. The programming, the subconscious programming, happens through a zero, or maybe being in mama's belly until 7, right? This is the real subconscious programming. And the food, right? The environments, the relationships, and so on. But now in this oneness, in the transcendence, we can now observe all of it. We can observe the food, the safety, the belonging part, right? We can the esteem, the ego part, and the part that integrates it, right? The self-actualization part, the individualization part, the spiritual self, right? The transcendent part can also observe the spiritual ego, right? And that is the part where we are becoming our higher self. That is the part that I would like to claim, you know, this is the I, right? We've all seen that. It's also part of the dollar sign and so on, is the observer self, the I that sees yourself, your human self. And you can now, from that part, and this is also where my work resides, right? It's about you now consciously, for example, setting up your own values, right? Your own values, and saying, this is very important to me. I believe it always has to come with a level of understanding that no, you can not do what you want. Okay, that is the distinction. Because I've spoken about also cult practices, and I have known, if you don't know me, if you're new to this, maybe you want to look at the other videos that I've done. Like, I have known people that have been in the occult. I've known people that have been in um, Freemason groups, and I've studied it myself to see what's the distinction, right, between also like what I teach and what they teach, right? And one of the more of the, if you want to call it, the satanic or the evil part of that kind of practice is this: you can do whatever you want. You can do whatever you want. This is what we see on this grand scale right now that is coming out in big politics and so on. I do not believe that you can do what you want, because there are universal laws. And I believe, and that's the practice that I promote, is that you want to become a a life producing organism in the grand scheme of things. That means you are in alignment with universal laws, and universal laws are life giving and life sustaining laws, right? So you want to continue to be a giver of life. Okay, very important, very important. Okay, but what, again, like when you get to the level of transcendence, you want to have your own rules, your own moral compass, because morality and values is a matter of self actualization and self transcendence. Every here on that, on these four other levels, there is no morality, there's only survival, right? There's only survival, right? You do whatever you can to get to that level, and to think here, this is also very dominance. Like, self-esteem is about dominance, right? As I said, it's status symbols, it's brands, it's very masculine, it's dominance. This is where most men are. It's in this esteem category, the Western world, right? I am somebody, I am above you. I am more dominant because of my skills. And most of the time, it's also through systemic injustices. But through my skills, I I can acquire these resources and therefore buy myself the symbols of dominance, because status can be equated to dominance. Yeah. So that's what we transcend. Okay. But on the level of actualization and transcendence, you establish your own values. What is your moral compass? And we align this moral compass with the laws of nature, which is deeply rooted in, if I serve the greater good of all. That is one of my premises, like one of my manifestos: serving the collective. And my job, my purpose here is to serve the feminine collective in becoming self actualized and lead from a level of self actualization. Okay, so what are your values? You create your own values, right? You operate life from your own values, from your own moral code, and you create your life along the lines of your self proclaimed manifesto, your self proclaimed value system. That is important to me. And you learn to channel your energy into those areas that you value. Okay, so moral compass based on universal laws, very important. That's why you need to study the universal laws. Again, if you're interested in all of that, this is all part of my curriculum in my school community. I have programs, the Dream Builder system, which is part of like really healing. It's still healing. Then it's a life mastery system where we are more in the field of transformation, really transcending. And then it's studying the universal laws and studying the mind, because you have different faculties in the mind. But coming back to becoming your observer self, your higher self, the all-seeing eye, right, is about you actually being your own God. That is the secret, right? Because if you are becoming your higher self, you are your own moral compass. As I said, you are your own moral compass. You create your own moral compass. You design your own moral compass, but not from a place of do what thou wilt. No, but in alignment with life, in alignment with universal laws, which are perpetually life giving, right? One of the laws of nature and one of the laws of abundance is give and you shall also receive, right? You first give and you're going to get something back. Very practical, tangible example is planting a seed, tending to it, and reaping the fruits, right? You first have to give, you first have to plant the seed before you can actually reap the benefits, right? You first have to give and serve, right? Again, we speak about leadership and why self actualization is the road to self leadership, and then also the leadership of a certain um, area of life, right? Whether it is helping children, women, food, animals, the planet. That's what I'm here for. So, really um, applying and aligning with the laws of nature, like the law of circulation, right? Which is giving and receiving, but it has to be activated through giving. Giving is a masculine principle, is a doing before you can receive. Again, it's in alignment with the levels of the pyramid, because the esteem part, for example, when almost 10 years ago, I had to get to the level of esteem where I was in corporate working in finance. And then I had enough money to give and invest in my personal development. So I first had to get here into my masculine and then give so I could receive a new operating system, new knowledge, integrate it and become it. So this is where I got to a level of self-actualization and integration, integrating the feminine aspect, the spiritual side of success, and to execute on the masculine. I hope that makes sense, right? It's always masculine and then feminine, right? Or feminine, masculine. Masculine, well, maybe that's both. I'm trying to see the patterns and all, but belonging is feminine. Then you do, right? You start doing things. It's like a by me. Then life starts happening through you, right? Like you become the vessel for it. And then up here in the integration and in the oneness, observer self, life happens as you, because you realize you are one with life, and you realize that you giving to others is ultimately you giving to yourself, right? That is becoming a servant to humanity, right? To wrap it up for today, again, as I said, oh yeah, that's also what I did here to finish the picture. That's it, right? When you are here, you can start giving. Life happens through you and as you, and you start giving from your overflow, and then it comes back, and you give more, and 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 it comes back. That is the ever upward spiral of becoming, the Fibonacci sequence. I have this book here. I don't know if the camera shows it. In Tune with the Infinite. This is one book that we read in my book club. If you're interested, again, in the link down below is the school community. That's what we read, right? Because we want to prime our minds. And that is it. You become a vessel to give life onto life and continue to eat the fruit, right? You give and you receive. So That's it, right? Understanding where you are on that level. And it's a constant checking, right? Sometimes you're here and then you still have to figure out how maybe you're going to pay maybe for the next level of accommodation, right? The food, everything wants to get better, right? As I said, once you become conscious, you get out of this survival mode food, you get out of the survival mode safety, the hoarding, right? You get out of the survival mode just trying to fit in with whoever is available. No, you become more selective. You become very selective, qualitative selective, right? Because you understand that your body needs better, right? Even survival becomes better. You need food, but what kind of food? Not just any, right? Safety, the same. Belonging. You don't just continue to attach yourself to toxic people, maybe because you were programmed to do so. No, you'll learn how to get in alignment with other more qualitative, more morally just people. And you learn that, sure, self esteem, having an ego is okay. Beauty is okay. Taking care of yourself, sure, is okay. Taking care of the physical things, right? Liking luxury and pleasantries. Of course, we like that, of course. But that's not who you are. You're not addicted to showing people that you need to. That you have, like, you're so distinct, you're so different, you don't need all the brands to show that you are somebody. No, because the next level is you become esteemed from within. The next level, self-actualization, is to understand that you are a spiritual being, a conscious being, and a human experience, and your self-confidence, your self-esteem comes from your moral compass, from what kind of person you are, and if you like yourself, if you are living in alignment with your own set of rules and your own morals and your own values, which are in alignment with universal law, and therefore you being a servant to life itself, to life, to the planet, to animals, to the water, to the forest, to the children, to the women, right? You become a giver of life. I think that's everything that I wanted to say. Is also the four levels of consciousness. I've baked it in here. Is like this coming out of victim mode, right? Which is more of a childlike consciousness, which we've all been in, right? It's not bad, but at one point you have to exit the survival mode of the child psychology, the victim mode. Oh, life is happening to me. No, now you have agency. Now you decide, right? And this is when start life first happens by you, where you put in effort and you get all the degrees and you get the self-esteem, and then life starts, if you continue to evolve, right? When you invest in personal development, your life starts happening through you. You become a conduit for life, right? And then at one point, when you are self actualized, when you're integrated, when you're individualized and transcended, going more and more into the higher mind, into meditation, where you can observe your thoughts, where you can observe your feelings, where you can observe your human needs and urges and can actually control them through fasting or detoxification, for example. Life becomes happens as you become one with life, but in an individualized state, right? You don't lose yourself. You still are in that vessel and you still appreciate your ego, your human self, your body, but you know that that's not all that you are. That's it. For me, it was very fun. I hope that you took a lot from it. As I said in the beginning, I want you to take pen and paper, and I hope that you wrote a few things down, right? To really go through all of the levels and see where you're maybe still operating from a pattern that you have inherited and you just have kept throughout the years. Maybe it's the food, right? Maybe it's the patterns that you have with safety, with hoarding, right? Or not moving, or the people that you still believe that you need to belong to in order to stay safe, right? Or maybe you're being stuck in your ego, right? This is the whole thing with being perfect, perfectionistic. As I said, a lot of people in the Western world are stuck here, especially my clientele, women who are in corporate, women who are have already built a name or a career for themselves, are stuck in this esteem thing, which is too much of an ego, right? You have the symbols, the accolades, right? Check that out and see maybe where you are addicted to the dark side of that concept, right? Because once you know you are cool, you have done that, but there's more. There's more. And the more is when the first time when you become spiritual, where you really transcend only the physical and you integrate, go within and expand from within and create your own value system and live more from the observer mind. All right, that's it for today. If you liked what you heard today and you want to hear more, like, comment, subscribe, join the school community, book your one-on-one consultation. Let's see if we can work together, because I know that the world right now really needs more female leaders who are really solid on all levels and who can lead from an embodied, authentic place. Because I always like to say the world has so many problems, and this is our opportunity to step into leadership. It's your opportunity, and I'm here to serve. Until then, take care.